From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
And good day, I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, and you're watching Indiana Issues, the public affairs program where we try to go beyond the headlines and the sound bites and bring you Indiana's newsmakers and opinion makers in their entirety. We're coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. And on today's program, the Democrats just wrapped up their national convention, so we'll talk about that. And what impact will it have here on the state of Indiana? And with about 70 days and change to go, what are the big issues our panel is looking for? Our panel we have so far today, we're joined by Republican Jim Merritt, and of course our good friend, Libertarian Mark Rutherford. Also expect to be joined sometime in the next half hour by our good friend, Winston, former chairman of the state Democratic Party. So Jim, we'll start with you. First of all, your thoughts on the Democrats National Convention this past week.
Well, I think they got what they needed to get done, and it was, in some regards, was impressive when they had the roll call and something creative. All the networks were there. They covered it. We know Fox is more of a conservative network, and they were there and covered it in completion. And I thought the convention was. It wasn't as rowdy and rowdy is the wrong term. Probably it wasn't as exciting, I think, as the Republicans. But I'm biased, and it had some punch, and the speech by the vice president was workmanlike. Not exactly, it was light on detail, but more introduction of the vice president, and now it's going to be a policy election, believe it or not.
Mark, your thoughts on how the Democrats did this past week?
Well, I was a little surprised that it was a little bit more low-key is not the right word, but it wasn't quite as exciting as I thought they were going to try to make it to be. But based on what they were dealing with beforehand with President Biden, the issues that are being raised by that, I think it went fine and exceeded my expectations. The Republican and Democrat national conventions are highly scripted. I understand why. It's on national TV. They've got policies they want to get out there. They've got things they want to do. So I think it went fine, and saw a little bit of Vice President's speech, and she did a fine job. Workmanlike is a good description of it that Jim just used, but it was fine, and it helped them, in my opinion, did not hurt them.
I believe Winston has also just joined us. We're talking about the Democratic National Convention that folks had up in Minnesota this past week. Your thoughts on how it all went?
First off, I apologize for being late. Wonderful technology, discovering it right now that I have Zoom capabilities. So I apologize, Mark. I apologize, Senator, and I apologize, Brother Abdul. It was a great convention. We got a lot of work to do. I still believe that we're the underdog in this race. Anybody that doesn't believe it is wrong. So we got a lot of work to do.
One of the big things, and Rob, we'll start with you, that was in this convention was sort of the energy and enthusiasm that was sort of captured that maybe sort of changed the dynamics in this race and in places nationally where Donald Trump was ahead, Kamala either slightly ahead or is tied.
Right. Well, I think that you have to be aware that in 2016, Hillary Clinton was in the same kind of area. We had to be very cautious. I'm sorry, Abdul and everybody, but I'm just cautiously optimistic at this point. There's still a lot of work to do ahead of this campaign. And I would say that, yes, you've seen momentum shift greatly. I mean, millions of dollars raised, hundreds of thousands of volunteers coming forward. But as we were saying to folks as we left, now we got to get to work. And that's where it really comes down to, are the phone banks and the rallies and the yard signs and the get out the vote and the early vote. It's time to get to work, and that's what we have to do.
Jim, let me ask you, how much do you think that energy and enthusiasm is going to play once folks, in those competitive areas? Indiana may not be as competitive. We'll get to Indiana just a bit. But how much do you think that energy and enthusiasm is going to work out, in those competitive battleground states, those Nevadas, those Georgias, those Arizonas, to a lesser degree, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
Well, Robin is exactly right. It's really the meat and potatoes of campaigning now. It's getting to those undecideds, those independents, the people. Uh, gosh, if you look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, maybe North Carolina, if you look at those states and just the thousands of people, thousands of votes, if you will, that will make the difference in this 50-state campaign, where it comes down to 7 or 8 states. It's anybody's ball game right now. It's how the get out the vote and the actual getting people to vote. And the Republican Party historically does not vote prior to Election Day. We vote on Election Day, and I think it's just incredibly important that the state parties throughout those states, along with the rest of them, urge, encourage, beg, whatever, to get people out to vote early.
Mark, your thoughts on once again that energy and enthusiasm, and how do you think it's going to play out in those battleground states?
Well, I think it's going to help the Democratic Party quite a bit, based on the nominee of the vice president as their presidential candidate. And the convention was a fine convention, so it didn't hurt them. It may have helped them a little bit, but it's anybody's game to win right now. And we'll just see what happens. I think it looks very much like 2016, and we saw what happened at the end of that one. Jim makes a good point. Republicans, it seems like, do vote on the election day. Democrats tend to vote a little earlier in early elections. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on this. I'm following it closely, and lately, in my opinion, the Republicans nationally have done somewhat of a better job going out and getting voters in and getting people to vote in. So the question is, are the Democratic Party, is it going to do a much better job this time? And that's kind of what I'll be looking for. And that's what I'm going to be seeing is, do they get their act together, and do they do that? And if they do, then they have a chance to win the presidency.
So before we move on, I want to hit back in that 2016, because Jimmy made the reference that a lot of what we're seeing is sort of reminds of 2016. But wasn't 2016 sort of a different issue? Because I would argue that Hillary Clinton, those folks, took things for granted and didn't go to Wisconsin, didn't go to Pennsylvania, didn't go to Michigan, and Donald Trump did, and that was sort of enough. I'll tell you, even if you are the front runner, you can't take anything for granted.
Well, no, you can't take anything for granted, and you're not in this case, we're not the front runner. She didn't go to Wisconsin at all in 16. Keep that in mind. So I think that really hurt. But also, Donald Trump of 24 is a lot different than Donald Trump of 16. I mean, there wasn't a lot known about this guy except what he wanted to put forth for you in 16. I'm a successful business guy. I'm on The Apprentice. I've had all the trappings of Richie Rich. I've got all these things going for me. There's a big difference between 34 convictions, some of the statements he's made, some of the statements he continues to make, even in this campaign. So, I'm not so sure that the model of 16 of Donald Trump, Abdul, is the same model of 24. He had a very tenacious Nikki Haley campaign that in this state alone resulted in 22% of the Republican by party registration, remember. Now you can say some Democrats crossed over, but I don't think it was that big. But 22% of the vote went to Nikki Haley in this state. So I think there's a difference there. Also, Hillary Clinton had a very contested primary with Bernie Sanders that used a lot of resources in 16. Since this has been a 30-day sprint, that same thing hasn't happened. So I think there are some of those issues are a little bit different.
Jim, let me get your response to that, to what Robin said before we move on.
Well, there's a reason why we had the convention in Wisconsin, and we know that is about battleground state. And I heard just a little bit of a clip on when Trump was commenting last night on the vice president's speech, and he was very clear and concise in his rebuttal. I didn't hear the whole thing, so there might have been some negativity. But the more that Donald Trump can demonstrate a discipline, and it's a big question of his record versus her record, what he believes his mission will be in the next 4 years, the better off the Republican Party will be. And it's right now it's a jump ball.
You're watching Indiana Issues, a weekly program that we talk to Indiana's newsmakers and policymakers. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. We're looking at Indiana's political landscape. Now I want to talk with our panel, Republican Jim Merritt, Libertarian Mark Rutherford, and Democrat Robin Winston, about Indiana's own political climate. We're about 70 days and change away from elections, but there's still lots of races going on. We've got a contested governor's race, an open seat, also open seat for the U.S. Senate, as well as Attorney General as well. Robin, we'll start with you. What do you think Democrats' chances are going to be coming in this election season?
I think keep your eye on the governor's race and lieutenant governor's race. I think that Jennifer McCormick and Abdul and everybody, if she replicates what Glenda Ritz and Joe Donnelly did in 12, and that would be, remember, a very spirited Republican primary where Richard Lugar, the icon of the party, was defeated by Murdoch. If they can replicate, Barack did not win the state. He won it in 08, as you all know. But in 12, he got 44% of the vote. If Kamala does equally as well or even does better, and Jennifer McCormick kind of runs alongside of her in some very big Democratic bastions of the state, gets those numbers, that's great. If teachers mobilize like they should, because they have one of their own running and education's a big issue, that's even better. But we also didn't have Roe versus Wade decided in 2012. And if that is as big of an issue as everyone says it is, and it manifests yourself on election day, I think we could be up very late on election night. That's how I see that race. The other races, one's at the whim of the courts or whatever is going on with Rokita and his ability to even be not found wrongdoing of what he's done in some areas. That'll be adjudicated a little bit later. I think that we have some very, very contested state house races that are going to be on the radar screen, particularly in Hamilton County and down around Bloomington. So right now, I think the climate, I call it Etch-a-Sketch. It was a toy I had when I was little. I think you draw it and you shake it and you start all over again. And I think the charcoal inside the Etch-a-Sketch is going to be very busy this fall.
Jim, let me get your thoughts on what Robin had to say. And just a quick thing about the Indiana Attorney General. I do think the odds favor Todd in that race, that he'll probably plot a slight victory, but I don't think he'll be able to serve because that's when the time when the disciplinary commission starts hearing all the complaints against him, the most latest complaint. And I hear there's another one out there, too, that's actually even worse. So that's out there. But, Jim, just want to get that in real quick. I'll let you respond to what Robin said.
Well, I think it's a Trump year in the state of Indiana. I think that I think that will flow throughout the system. You know, we have a supermajority. We have a governor candidate that is well funded, and you know, a lot of times these races come down to money and get out the vote, but more so money, and as well as Senator Braun has been on the ballot before. He has visited 92 counties 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and Ms. McCormick people really don't know who she is. Number one, she's a former Republican. I kind of go back to the time when she went down to Southern Indiana somewhere and to meet with some young Democrats, and they found out that she was a former Republican, and they're going like, what's going on here? And so I think it all comes down to name ID with Braun, and with the money advantage the Republicans will have. I think that will carry the day. I'm not sure about the Rokita issue. I think Todd has, you know, rolls out of bed in the morning with 15 to 20% of the Republican vote regardless. And I guess maybe a solution or scenario would be the Democrats focus in on that race. But I think Todd wins. I don't know what's going to happen after that, but I think Trump is going to vote strong in this state, and it's going to carry everyone.
Mark, what role will Chase Oliver and Don Rainwater play in this races?
Well, Chase Oliver, the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, he's working hard going across the nation. He's targeting a couple of 3 states. I'll be interested to see what results happen from that. And he's in the states he's targeting, he's getting quite a bit of good publicity and a lot of notoriety. That's positive notoriety. Don Rainwater, the issues are somewhat different. They're always different every 4 years, but he still has a lot of support. I've seen billboards. He's got billboards going up again. I believe some radio has started playing. So the question is, what type of attention will he get? Will Democrat McCormick be able to kind of deal with that? 4 years ago, the Libertarian Party was in second place in quite a few counties for the governor's race. Will that happen again? It's hard to tell. 70 days out, you just don't know what's going to pick up, what's not. I hear a lot of people who do like Braun. I hear a lot of people who don't. And that's kind of similar to what I heard about Governor Holcomb 4 years ago. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on it. I think the Libertarians will play a role again in who will be the next governor. And when it comes to Attorney General Akita, I think he'll win. The question is going to be is what's going to happen from the standpoint of the complaints that have been raised against him with the disciplinary commission. And we'll see what happens with those. But that's not going to happen until after the election, in my opinion.
One of the big issues, gentlemen, that I was kind of wondering about with respect to the election. Like I said, once again, we'll see what happens when the election comes through and comes forward. I know there's some talk about if you're moderate Republicans, you're not necessarily crazy about Micah Beckwith as lieutenant governor. On the Democratic side, if you're more progressive Democrat, you're not crazy about maybe some positions Terry Gooden's taking place. And then on the flip side, you got Mike Braun used to vote Democratic, now Republican. Jennifer McCormick, a Republican who's now a Democrat. I can't think of a better way to say, hey, welcome to 2024. Jim, we'll start with you.
Well, it certainly makes the campaign interesting. And we have no idea what's going to happen in 10 minutes, much less 70 days from now, or however long it is. And, when you look at it, the election really starts in September, late September, and people are campaigning dawn to dusk. And so you really don't know what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And so it's always a surprise. And Donald Rainwater did benefit in 2020 from a pandemic situation that bothered a lot of Republicans. And you really don't know what's actually going to happen in the debates. And but I look forward to a Republican year in the state of Indiana.
Robin, can you think of a better way to describe the year 2024 than the way I just described it?
No, other than Etch-a-Sketch. I mean, or I'm glad that we have, autocorrect in Word if we were typing it up. It's just, look what we went through in the last month, you all. I mean, the president gets out. Then we have everybody in front of the mirror prescribing themselves as vice president. Then we have to pick a presidential nominee. Then there was going to be a convention. Then Jim Clyburn wanted regional primaries. Then we went to a convention. Then we picked a vice presidential nominee. I mean, and then we had a 4-day convention. So, those of us on this side of the aisle are still kind of whipsawed a little bit on this. So I don't know. I think it's going to be I'm sorry. And in the middle of this, the president gets temporary assassination, former president. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there has been a lot of chaos in this campaign cycle, but I think the senator is exactly right. Right now, people are more focused on other issues, and they'll join themselves probably about 2 weeks before, maybe a week before early vote starts, and then it's a sprint at that point, and it is dusk to dawn campaigning at that point.
Robin, it's really interesting to me that we're the core here, but there are a lot of people out there, and some of them are in my family, that just don't care. And they don't think about it until they have to think about it. And I think I attend, sometimes I think, why isn't everybody involved and concerned and all that? But they have lives, they've got stuff to do.
They do.
My wife is one of them. Trust me, gentlemen. We got a few minutes left here before we get before we have to wind down. I want to turn our attention away from Washington D.C. and of course, the other, the Market Street, and talk about what's been the latest controversy that's been taking place in City Hall. Most recently, several young women, based on reporting with the Indianapolis Star and Mirror Indy, came out basically saying how former Mayor Joe Hogsett, Chief of Staff Thomas Cook, had engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior with several employees in their office. These women to come forward. You've got the council sort of in a tizzy right now. Democrats are mad, Republicans upset. There's talk about whether the mayor should stay, step down. What did the mayor know? When did the mayor know it? Mark, we'll start with you. As sort of the libertarian in all this, your thoughts on what's been going on at City Hall?
Well, libertarians are upset about it as well. It's amazing what's been happening. And when we first heard bits and pieces coming of it, you go, well, sometimes things happen, people don't know about it. But more and more and more pieces are coming down about people saying that they were harassed sexually, and it's just amazing how it keeps going and how the mayor would not know about it, and what did he do about it, and how was he doing it? And this is why you have Democratic council members upset as well as Republican, and it's just becoming a real mess out there. I don't know how it got this bad, is the way I'm looking at it, especially in 2024. When I first started practicing the law in 1986, there was still quite a bit of this going on. The laws were still being developed. Attitudes were quickly changing. But boy, it's been 40 years almost since then. So I'm just surprised it got to this point in Indianapolis.
Robin, what are Democrats saying right now?
Depends on which Democrats you talk to, Abdul. There are some people that are very upset with the entire procedure. Jennifer McCormick made a very strong statement about it. There are others that are kind of, gathering around support of the mayor and following his actions. Senator Hundley, as you know, called for expansion of training, not just at City Hall, but among state party and those things. I think the best way for this to be resolved is get through the investigation, review, and release the results when you finish that investigation. And obviously, be respectful of whatever our personnel rules or things like that. But as long as this is going to be out there in the public discourse, let the investigation run its course, and let's make sure that people do get the results, or at least a summary of the results, so you can move ahead.
Jim, your thoughts on what's been going on on the 25th floor?
Well, I'm sad about it, frankly. I think you all three know me pretty well. I'm sad about it. And earlier this year, one of my former members of the Senate, a former colleague of mine in the Senate, ran into a situation. I thought Senator Hundley's remarks were spot on. It's just a very difficult time. I think I'd really love to see the transparency for all of this come out. I don't want anybody to leave government because this happened a while. I want to know exactly what happened, and and then make a critical decision. Not me, but the folks that are in charge, the leaders that are in charge. And as someone that grew up in Indianapolis, I just don't want to see this. And we need leadership. And we need people to make decisions that might hurt their party, but help their community. And it's just a sad situation. I feel for those that have come forward. Boy, what an act of courage that must be. And, the strange thing about this is that a lot of these situations happen when we had the Me Too movement in that time. And I would have thought that people would become super sensitive to to that. We don't want this to happen at any time. But but when you look at the time frames, it's just interesting that it happened during that time. But I think VOP and the council will flesh this out, hopefully sooner than later. And we can't have this. We have to treat everyone equally and fairly and as well with sensitivity these days. And it's disappointing.
Well, gentlemen, we got about a little less than 5 minutes left, so I want to move to our last topic. The next 70-something days and change to see what's in the political ether, what's in the sort of political football. It's sort of like a combination of our predictions and prognostications, if we could. So, Robin, we'll start with you. What's going to be the big story you're going to be watching over the next 70 days? What should the folks in our audience pay attention to?
How much Donald Rainwater captures of the vote and its impact upon the election. There is not one day, Abdul, that in my days right now that I'm not trying to compute that. He got 11%, I think, in 2020. I think that Mark has positioned, because you can remember the days when it was 2%. So I think he's positioned his party to be a broker in this thing. I also think the other thing that we will keep an eye on is, and talk about disappointing, Senator, but 60 years ago this time, Bobby Kennedy was at the national convention speaking. We may have his son endorsing Donald Trump. That is something that those campaigns as third-party candidates are things I'm keeping my eye on. Abdul.
Mark?
Well, thank you, Robin, for pointing out the Libertarians' progress. And that's what I'm looking for is Libertarians are much better at doing the work that needs to be done to get the word out about what it is that we think things should be or how they should be run, getting money better, getting into the debates, having better people in the debates. So the question is, how well will Don Rainwater's campaign be and other campaigns that are out there for Congress, et cetera, that will make a difference, and who knows what it will do. I'm hoping it'll be better than 11%. A lot of people didn't expect that until near the election itself in 2020. So that will be the interesting thing. But the other thing that'll be interesting, I'll be looking for is, will the Indiana Democratic Party be getting back to what it was back when the governor was Evan Bayh, and before that, where I thought they had a better groundwork, a better activity, better getting people out to the vote, getting the issues out that they believed in, and can they get back to that status again? And the other thing I'm looking for is the Republicans. I do not have a good idea how solid Senator Braun's voting base is. I know it's what it is in the primary, but that's not enough to win an election. I keep hearing all types of things out there. So whatever it is, 2024 will be a very interesting election. And I'm with Jim. I don't think people are going to start getting really interested and talk about what they want for 3 or 4 weeks. So it's really like the last 45 days that I think will tell me more rather than the last 70.
Jim, I'll give you the last 60 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Robin, when Bobby Kennedy came here for the Indiana primary, that was one of my first impressions of politics and the issues that he represented. And so seeing Bobby Jr., if you will, has been kind of an interesting point for me. And back then, I don't know if you remember this or not, but Ronald Reagan and Bobby Kennedy actually debated. And so I remember watching that. And so those two really brought me into and then Bill Hudnut, of course. But bottom line is, I think we're going to see water as a continual issue and how we're going to harness that for the future, economic development. And I think education with this, trying to figure out the diplomas for the people entering high school in 25 and graduating 29, and the science of reading. I hope that we can get to a issues type of race in presidential and gubernatorial.
All right. Well, I guess in the program today have been our good friends, Republican Jim Merritt, Democrat Robin Winston, and Libertarian Mark Rutherford. Special thanks to all of our guests, and of course the good folks here at Site Strategics at the Edge Media Studios here in downtown Indianapolis. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time on Indiana Issues.